What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I am Nicole with SewGnar Sewing Patterns, and we are here today with another installment of the SewGnar Throwback Train. And in today's video, we're going to be doing the tall version of the Taisteal Tote. You guys really responded to last week's video, and so I thought, why not? It's been 3 years since I've made a tall Taisteal video, and just like it was with the wide, I had so much fun reliving this pattern and making it, and I'm always pleasantly surprised with how quick they come together. So I cut out the tall, and I went to reference an old video because somebody asked me a question and I couldn't remember the answer. And wouldn't you know, I cut out the same exact pattern. Now, I don't use this cacti cork often. I do have a pretty good amount of it because when it was for sale, I started to hoard it. I noticed that some of the prints, they were going away slowly. So I do have some prints in my stash that I hold on to and that I hoard. And I thought that it was past time to dust off some of this cacti print, and I'm so glad that I did. But I just thought that it was hilarious that when I checked my previous video from 3 years ago, this is the same exact combo that I used. Now, I did add the accent bottom and I added the magnetic snaps at the top, but other than that, this is the pattern as written. It's just updated techniques, just like last week's video with the wide Taisteal was. So I won't keep you with all the details, and I of course go over everything in the video. And if you are looking for any links, be sure to scroll down, look down below, because I do take the time to list out things that I use, the thread, the stitch length, all of that pertinent type information is usually down below. And if not, you can just leave me a comment and I will respond to you if I know the answer. So yeah, without further ado, enjoy the tall Taisteal. Let's get this party started with a quick material overview. Starting over here on the right, I have my zipper tape along with my pull already attached, my zipper overlay template, my 2 interior tags, and my exterior tag. And I'm using this gorgeous discontinued print that you used to be able to get it from Fabric Fun House, but alas, you could not buy it anymore. And I do apologize, and I'm so sorry, but I have been hoarding some for many, many years, and I decided to pull it out of the vault for today's project. So cacti cork for the bottom exterior pieces, both of those. And then I'm doing black as my accents. So I love pairing this like really bright hot pink and black with these. And then if you look, the prickly pear flowers are yellow, which is why I chose the yellow zipper here. It's my favorite combo to use on all this. So for the top pieces, I have black cork. Ta-da! And then for the accent base, I'm doing black cork as well. I have hot pink for my straps. And for my eyeglass case, I'm doing the cacti as well. For the interior, we have this really pretty Giuseppe deco style print. So I have my interior lining pockets, my exterior slip pocket, and then my 2 linings. A note about some of the modifications or some of the things that I've already done is I've already gone ahead and interfaced everything. I'm using decovil light, and as outlined in the pattern, I have tapered the bottoms of my interiors here to come in. All of these measurements are in the pattern. I have already Mod Podged the edge of my zipper overlay here. And then just like in my last video, I did leave off the last 1/2 inch of my interior pockets decovil light. You don't have to do that on the exterior pocket because we're stitching this all the way up and we're not flipping it right side out. So we're not gonna have any bulky seams here, but for this one, I left the 1/2 inch. And I got a little squirrely when I was doing my placement here. It was intended to be a 1/2 inch, but you know, act like you don't see that. And then of course I did do the same thing for the tall Taisteal that I did for the wide Taisteal. So I interfaced the cork the same way. I left a 1/2 inch on either end. These are my exterior top pieces. And then for the exterior mains, I interfaced the whole thing, but I left the 1/2 inch at the top because remember, this is where we're going to put our top and bottom together, stitch, flip. So pulling this out of, pulling the interfacing out of that seam right there is what's going to avoid bulk, and it'll fold super nicely. It just really helps things along. Now, of course, you do not have to do interfacing on your exterior at all. This is just if you want to. But as always, I am just a pattern shaman. I'm here to guide you through it. At any point, you can stray from the pack. You can do whatever you want to make this bag your own. There are lots of options for customization. I think a fun area would be the exterior bottom section. It's such a large piece. You could do some embroidery here. You could do some quilting. You could put foam on the back if you like the feel of foam on your bag. Really, this is just a jumping off point for your creativity, so go wild. So whenever you're cutting out your accent bottom, you're going to cut it 11 inches wide by 5 inches tall, and your stabilizer will be 10 inches wide by 2.5 inches tall. First things first, we're going to get our straps prepped and ready to go. So I have both of them here. On the wrong side, I'm going to use a marking pen. I'm going to mark right down the center of the entire length of the strap. And then I'm going to use some 1/2 inch double stick tape and apply it right over that line that I just drew. And then we're going to fold our long edges in toward that center line, but we're not going to make our sides meet up. We want to leave the slightest gap right down that center line, so that way whenever we fold over to create the rolled handle, we don't have to fight with this edge back here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that for both of them, and then I will be back whenever I'm done. All right, here we go. We are all ready to fold up to create our rolled handles. So go ahead and grab some clips if you haven't already. I wanted to show you the gap that I left. You can see it's about a 1/16, just a scant eighth maybe. And I do that so that whenever we fold these two over to enclose that raw edge in there and to create our rolled handle, what it does is it just makes for a nice, easy fold. You're not having to tug and pull to make sure that your edges are flush. So let's go ahead and actually, before we fold, we need to do some marks here. So from the right side of your strap, you're going to measure up 4 inches and then 4 3/4. Now in the pattern, I originally did 4 inches and then 4.5 inches. And I've just found throughout the years that giving yourself that additional 1/4 inch just makes attaching the straps to the bag a lot easier. Whoa, lost one. Alrighty, Spideys. So you can see I made my little tiny ticks there. You want to do it in something that can be removed, so that way you're not going to see those marks whenever the bag is done. And so now what we do is we're just going to clip between, if we're counting our lines, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're going to clip between dashes 2 and dashes 3. And that's going to be the entirety of your rolled handle. So do that for both. And I do like to clip a little past the last line, so then that way when I remove this clip while sewing, this edge down here still stays nice and flush. I'm not having to pull on it. And then this edge, whenever I'm first starting, is already folded correctly as well. Okay, now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to stitch in between lines 2 and 3. We're going to back stitch well at start and stop because this is going to be the beginning of our rolled handle. So we want to make sure that those stitches do not pop. We're going to do that on both. Again, we're starting from the second dash and stopping at the third dash. We are not stitching in this section yet. Since I decided to use this gold thread, I'm going to have to mind my manners whenever I'm stitching. I'm going to have to play it safe and not go crazy. Keep it between the mayo and the mustard so that way I don't mess my stitches up. I always like to add a rivet here right down where the stitch line ends, just for added security. The next thing that we're going to do is add our straps to the exterior top panel. And so I'm going to put some double stick tape on the wrong side of the strap here just to help with that step. Right now we're going to work on the front panel. So that's the panel that has the slip pocket. So I've gone ahead and grabbed one of my exterior bottoms, one exterior top, and then both of my exterior pocket linings, and then one handle. But for now, we're just going to be working on the exterior top. So grab that. You want to flip your handle so that the rolled part is face up on your workstation. And we need to align the outermost edge of this side of the handle 2.5 inches over. So go ahead and measure with the long straight edge, 2.5 inches. And I like to just hold my ruler in place, and then I'm going to peel my tape. And I'm going to overhang about 1/2 inch, but I'm using the edge of my ruler to line up the edge of my handle right here so that I know it's nice and straight. Apply some pressure and then repeat that for this side. So it should look something like this. And I know that you want to stitch these down, but we're not going to do that yet. So we're working from the bottom edge here. We're going to take our exterior bottom and find the top edge of it. Now I know that it's the top edge a couple of ways. One, I'm using directional cork, but two, because that's where the gap of my interfacing is. So I'm going to line those edges up and then add a couple clips in here across this edge. Next, we're going to grab our exterior pockets. And so I'm going to flip the panel back over. Now I messed this up in my Taisteal Tote video, but I'm not going to do it here. Ensure that you have the correct exterior pocket piece, the top section, so the bigger piece, and we're going to overlap above this exterior top section by 1/2 inch. Now, if you did the interfacing like I did and you left the 1/2 inch gap, then that is going to be really helpful for you right now because it tells you exactly where you need to lay your pocket. But if you didn't, that's totally fine. You can just measure on the wrong side here and mark where you need to align this raw edge to the overhang of your pocket. Once you get the pocket top in place, you're going to carefully flip everything and lay the pocket bottom the same way. Now I'm going to go to my machine and I'm going to stitch using 1/2 inch. Now this is something that I did in the Taisteal video and I found it very helpful. In the original pattern, I tell you to use 1/4 inch, but if you bump it to 1/2 inch on this step here, it makes the next process a lot easier because we're going to have to fold and butterfly and top stitch everything open. And having a little bit more runway here to work with is helpful. So I'm going to stitch 1/2 inch all the way across, and this is going to be a by feel step. So whenever you get to the outside of your strap, well, technically to the inside of your strap, I'm going to add some back stitches, and then I'm going to switch to a basting stitch from the inside of this strap here until I get to the inside of this strap over here. We're going to baste this whole section here. Once I get back onto this strap, I'm going to lower my stitch length, add some back stitches, and then stitch all the way across the entire panel. This is what we are working with here. You just want to make sure that you caught all of your edges, and if you didn't, you want to go back and straighten some things out. Make sure that you caught the edges of your pocket up here and that you're nice and straight here on the main panels. Druzy is feeling very salty because every time I'm sewing, I'm hitting her with things, and then She just moved over here. I don't know if you could see how grumpy she is right now, but you are gonna have to move, my darling. She's in a bitey mood right now. All right, so once we get to here, we are going to do some finger pressing. I'm going to pull the main panel down and out of the way, finger press well. And then up here, or from the back here, I'm going to pull the pocket top up toward the exterior top section. And then the tricky part is we need to butterfly these seams open. Now it gets to be pretty bulky up and through here. So this, whenever you're top stitching, take your time. Take your time. So once you get this finger pressed enough that you can work with it, we're going to top stitch from the front panel 1/8 up here on the exterior top, go all the way across the whole panel, come down, and then 1/8 along the exterior bottom. What you should be catching is both of these seams going in opposite directions. So again, nice and slow, work your way across the whole panel. What you'll see me do is reach one of my hands under the panel so that I'm just moving my finger along the butterflied edge down here just to make sure that it stays nice and flat as I'm stitching it. And we are not switching to a basting stitch. We're going to go back down to our original stitch, which you should have already been, but your original stitch length across both sections here, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now I just skipped a stitch here coming off of my strap. Show it to you. Right here. So I'm going to pick this out and go back and fix this. Now because I had to go back and fix this, I left tails to pull through and tie off to hopefully camouflage that additional seam right across the top of the original. So I'm just going to tie this off real quick. All right, once you get all of your top stitching and everything looks good back here, what we're going to do is pull the pocket top down, and what should happen is all of your edges should line up perfectly. Yay, I did it right this time. Go me. So once you get that folded, put a clip or two here just to hold it in place, and what we're going to do is flip, and we need to reveal the pockets down here. So I'm going to pull the exterior bottom up and out of the way, and just keeping everything aligned, I'm going to stitch onto my pocket just a little bit and close this whole section up. And then now lastly, to finish off this panel, we just need to stitch up and across and back down, and that is where that first tick mark that we made a while back is going to come into play. So I'm going to stitch 1/8 of a seam up. I'm going to pivot on that mark, stitch across to this mark over here, and then come back down, and I'm going to do that for both sides. Now if you want to, you can pull threads and tie off to the back or back stitch well. All right, I've got my threads all tied off to the back, and this is what we are looking like on the front here. Everything looks nice and smooth and straight, and that is exactly what I'm going for. So now I want to add some rivets here just for security later on when the bag is in use. You could do double rivets, you could do single rivets, you could do no rivets. It's totally up to you. I like to personally add them right here, and right here, because this is where people are going to be getting in and out of the pocket. So I want to add some sort of additional security in the event that my thread pops. And then here is a high stress point for these top corners, because what I've found is that when people have their bags sitting most usually in the back seat of their car and they grab it, the bag itself gets caught on something while the handle comes with them. This whole area here is what is absorbing the pull from the back seat of the car, and I've seen those stitches pop. Now, alternatively, you can shorten this stitch length if you want to, and then you can put a rivet on top, or, you know, it's totally up to you how you want to do it. You can add a second line of stitches. That would be cool, nice and decorative. Up to you. Anyways, I'm going to put rivets, so I will be right back. Now, one of you guys told me about this, and it's called a Japanese hole punch, and I've got to say, it makes punching holes in the middle of panels so much easier than trying to fight with a standard push punch. So Japanese hole punch comes with a bunch of different size hole punches up here, and the way that it works is you just compress it and it goes down into the spiral and it punches through all the layers. I love it so much. All right, now we need to open this pocket back up. So we're going to pick those stitches out, those basting stitches that we put in there. So I'm just going to grab a seam ripper, and then what I like to do is fold this panel back onto itself, and then just very carefully you're going to reach in there with your seam ripper and pick those basting stitches out. Once you pick them out, your pocket is now exposed and ready to be used. Last thing I'm going to do is add my metal, what is this called? I'm gonna add my metal name tag up here in this general area. You can add it wherever you want. That's just where I like to add it. The front panel of the Taisteal Tote is now complete. I'm going to repeat all of those steps, except I'm going to omit the pocket. But I'm going to repeat all the other steps to complete the second side. Now, if you want your bag to have two recessed pockets, go for it. Just follow all of these same steps that you just did, and then both sides of your bags will have these pockets here. But for me, I'm just going to do everything with the exception of adding that pocket. To make that other side, you need your exterior top, exterior bottom, and remaining handle. Put your exterior bottom to the side for now, and we are going to tape our handle into place. Now remember, you want the folded edge face up. And I'm going to, again, use my ruler, align it 2.5 inches over, peel this tape, and then stick this into place with a 1/2 inch overhang. All right, create your sandwich by putting the top edge of your exterior bottom along the bottom edge of your exterior top. And this we can clip into place the entire length of the panel. Next, we're going to stitch 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to fold and butterfly and top stitch just like we did on the other panel. Okay, last thing we need to do to finish this panel is stitch up, across, and back down. Both main panels are now ready to go, and so now we just need to put them together. So I'm going to start clipping here at the side seams because I want to ensure that these are nice and flush when the bag is completed. Okay, now we can cut out our bottom boxes here. We're going to cut out 1.5 inches. So then when the bag is complete, we have a 3-inch wide base. If you want your base to be wider, then you need to cut out a bigger box. If you want it to be smaller, then you cut out a smaller box. So I'm going to cut out the 1.5 and the 1.5. If you do decide to change this sizing, then you're going to have to also consider the sizing of your accent bottom. You will need your accent bottom to be as wide as from the interior of your box here to the interior of your box here. That's the length of your accent. And then the width, I usually do about 1/2 inch more narrow than the ending width of the bag. So since this one will be 3 inches, and I know that it'll be 3 inches because it's 1.5 inch boxes. So since the width will be 3 inches, that's why I cut mine to 2.5. But so that's how you would calculate how to make your accent bottom. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but if it was, then rewind and rewatch. So I'm going to cut these bottoms out. And then before we actually close up our entire bag, we need to attach that accent bottom. So we're gonna have to grab that and do a couple minor prep things to it as well. So once you get your squares cut out, you can just kind of set this to the side, grab your accent bottom and the stabilizers. So I have already gone and marked my centers on both, and I've added some tape. You can see that I put some tape lengthwise down the stabilizer and then again here. So I'm going to line up my midline on my stabilizer to my midline on my cork, leaving 1/2 inch on both short edges here. I'm going to tape this into place like so. And then these long edges are going to come up and over to enclose that stabilizer. So you want to make sure that you're getting a nice tight fit, but that you're not tugging on the cork or the vinyl or leather or whatever it is that you're using for this. Also, if you don't want to, you do not have to use a piece of Peltex or decovil heavy or anything in here. Just having the additional cork is going to make a big difference in the bottom base, in how structured it is. But I just like the, the additional Peltex in here. Whenever I run out of Peltex, this is just ground score basically. I've just had it in my closet for so long. But I would use probably a piece of Craftex because it's nice and thin and very, very sturdy. All right, now that our base is ready to go, we can go back to the machine. We're going to stitch just across the bottom here. Now I'm going back to my 1/4 inch seam allowance, just so you know. So for the rest of the pattern, 1/4 inch. But I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch across the bottom here, and then I'm going to butterfly this base open as well. You do not have to do that, but it makes for a nice flat bottom whenever you attach your contrast bottom. Now this butterfly seam does not have to be perfect because if you're adding the contrast bottom, it's going to be hidden. But you just want to, as best as you can, separate these two and make them lie flat. If you don't want to stitch, that's totally fine. You could do double stick tape, or really you could just leave it. It's not going to make a huge difference in the end. But it's just one of those details that will help out. The other option is if you have too many layers here and this 1/4 inch is too thin, then you could just fold them all to one side, which actually I think that's what I'm going to do myself. Let's stitch these down and out of the way though. All right, we're ready now to add our contrast bottom. So what we're going to do is just align it here in this opening right over this bottom section. And you should have a pretty decent meet up here. Everything should be fitting nicely. If not, go back to your table and make adjustments before you stitch this into place. But once it fits nicely, then you need to clip it down both sides. You can add a piece of tape, it's totally up to you. I'm just going to free willy it and clip. And then now I'm going to stitch it into place. You can do whatever type of design you'd like down here. I'm probably just gonna keep it cool with some vertical lines. All right, here is the fully put together exterior panels with the contrast bottom. You can see I just did a couple of parallel lines. So now to finish out this section, we are just going to align our side seams again and clip all the way down. And don't be afraid to put some pressure here to make these to make these corners meet up. And so once you get your sides all clipped into place, we're going to go to the machine and we're going to stitch just down both long edges here. And then we're going to reach in and box our bottoms by pushing these two pieces together flat and then stitching across. Again, 1/4 inch seam allowance on all of these. Now, ideally what we're looking for here is for this middle seam to match up with this underneath seam here. And so because I sewed them all to one side, I'm going to push these two seams in the opposite direction and then pull on everything until I can get these two seams to lay right next to each other. Last thing to do before we flip this bad boy right side out is to trim down some of these seam allowances here. So I'm going to start about 1 inch or so down and then trim to where I'm about 1/8, fat eighth from my stitch line. If you hear a bunch of jingling, it's because Clementine is up and scratching herself and her collar is so loud. I'm trimming everything down all around. If you have any close spots, like this is already a little close, so I'm not going to trim right there. If you have close spots, don't trim, or if you need to, go in and tighten up your stitch line to make sure that it is all even. I like to trim these side seams down pretty well, so that way when the bag is flipped right side out, these guys aren't just sticking straight out, because you will feel that whenever the lining is inserted and you're trying to get a nice side edge, this is just going to stick straight out. So the shorter the better, unless you want to take the time to butterfly the seam open and stick it flat. If you do that, then you'll have a nice flat interior. But if you want to avoid that step, then trim down just pretty close. Because we stitched this down earlier, that one's not going to be a problem at all. It's going to lay nice and flat. So let's flip this bag right side out. To finish it, we're going to have to flip it back to this, but I want to check out, make sure everything looks good before I commit to this being done and ready for us to move on to the interior. So what I'm looking at is I'm poking my corners out. I'm ensuring that I don't have any buckling of my accent bottom here and that it's all nice and flush and everything looks nice. So I'm just pushing on the inside on those corners to put them out as far out as they'll go. All right, everything looks good. This random thread here, that's kind of funny. It's like one of those random chin hairs that you don't notice until it's 1.5 inches long and you're like, oh my God, how long have you been there? Okay, so this looks great. I am really pleased with how this came out. Here is the slip pocket. How fun is that? I made it super nice and deep. I love that. Perfect for phone. I like the accent bottom here. It's subtle, but it's cool with the contrast thread. I really love the contrast thread on everything. I thought that it would stand out a lot more, but I think it is like the perfect amount of different. All right, let's make the inside. So let's get the eyeglass pouch prepped and ready to go, so that way whenever we are ready to insert it, we don't have to stall. So on the top edge, so when you cut it, it's a square. On the top edge, I like to angle it. If you look at my lines here, one is higher than the other. I angle it about 1/2 inch or 1 centimeter down. And that is the top edge. And then I put a piece of 1/4 inch tape here along that top edge. And I'm just going to fold it over, eyeballing it, but you want it to be a nice straight fold, roughly 1/2 inch. You can really fold over it, do whatever, just make sure it's nice and even. Once you get your edge folded and it's nice and straight, we're gonna go to the machine and top stitch just along that top angled edge. Okay, trim any threads that you might have, and then we're just going to fold it in half, lining up our sides and bottom, and clip this into place. And now you have a couple options here. You can leave it rectangular, that's up to you. This side seam over here on the right is going to be seated in between the 2 layers of the lining. So I'm not worried about this edge, but what I like to do on my eyeglass pouches is curve this section here, since this will be the side that's hanging into the middle of the bag. So I'm going to baste this side closed, come up the bottom, and then when I get to about here, I'm going to start my curve and curve up and just round this out and run my stitches right off that side. So it looks something like that, and then we're just going to go and trim this up. To trim this, I'm going to be using a rotary blade, and I'm going to be extra careful to hold it exactly vertical so that I don't get any beveling on either of the sides. And I'm just going to trim this curve down to about 1/8 inch. Now to finish this, I'm just going to Mod Podge the raw edge here, and then this will be ready to go whenever we get to that point in the pattern. Next up, we need to add our interior zipper pocket, and so I have my overlay prepped and ready to go. I just put 2 strips of 1/4 inch double stick tape here. I'm going to peel those. And then before I lay this in place, I'm going to add my woven label. I like my woven label to be at the bottom right, so while this is wrong side up, I'm going to lay it here on the left, and then when I flip it and put it into place, you'll see that it lays on the right. Move this to the side for a second. It's stuck. And I'm going to lay my ruler on the top edge, and remember, you'll know that this is a top edge. Number 1, if it's directional, it should be going toward the top, and number 2, the bottom is smaller than the top, so make sure that you're putting it on the top edge. We're measuring 2.5 inches down. We're going to lay this right in the center. All right, now that everything is in its place, I'm going to go to the machine. I'm going to top stitch just around the perimeter of my zipper overlay. I like to start and stop right here on my tag. Usually I'm doing coordinating thread, and so I'll just back stitch, but since I'm doing contrast thread, I'm going to pull my threads to the back and tie off. Pull my threads back now. Here we are. Looks pretty good. So if you can keep your stitches on track, you can marry it into the first hole where you started stitching. And it's a little bit funky, but to the untrained eye, I think it'll be totally fine. Now we just need to cut out this fabric from inside the lining, or from inside the zipper overlay rather. Slice right down the center, and then from the back, I'm gonna snip all the way to the edge and then cut this out. All right, once you get that out, we're going to put another layer of 1/4 inch tape. This time you could do it up next to your stitch line, the original stitch line here, to keep it out of what will become the new stitch line that we're about to make. And then we need to put our zipper tape into this box. So be aware of which side your zipper pull is coming from. If you want it to open from the left to the right, make sure that your pull is on the left. And if you want it to open from the right to the left, make sure your pull is on the right. I like to move it pretty close to the side where it's going to start the opening. So that way this bump where it pushes the zipper tape out is as close to the end as possible, and the rest of the tape is nice and straight. And then I start by laying this left side over here and then carefully pulling, getting my pull out of the way, and then gently guiding it into place where it's nice and straight, and then apply lots of pressure all around. There you go. And then from the back, you guessed it, we're gonna add more tape. So right at the top, again, keep it out of what will become your new stitch line. Here at the bottom, it doesn't need to run the length of the zipper tape because this is just holding our pocket linings in place until we can stitch them. And right now we're just going to put the pocket lining bottom into place. So peel that tape and lay your pocket bottom into place, like so. It should overhang the top of your panel here. And if it looks like this, then you're doing it correct. Now we're going to go to the machine. We're going to stitch just a straight line just under the bottom of the zipper teeth. Pull your threads to the back and tie off if that's what you did to begin with. Okay, once you get your ends tied, we're going to flip this section down and out of the way, finger press it really well, peel this next section of tape, take your other layer and then lay it in place like so. And then we're going to stitch. We're going to start over here. We're going to stitch up, around, and back down, and again pull our tails to the back to tie off. Now that we have our entire zipper in place, we need to, from the front, pull up the right side of the panel. We're going to stitch down. I like to stitch over my zipper teeth again, down and across, and we're going to leave a birthing hole down here. This will be our second birth hole that we're going to leave. So leave the birth hole and then restart your stitches here and then stitch all the way up to close this pocket. All right, my friends, we are now ready to trim down the back area here. I wanted to say, if you want to add any other pockets, this is the time to do it. You can add a slip pocket on the other interior panel. You can add another zipper pocket. You can add a laptop sleeve. You can add all sorts of things. You can do a double pocket. I mean, truly, the choice is yours at this point. But just like I was pointing out on, if you want to do fun stuff on the exterior of the bag, you just need to keep in mind that we will be cutting out the boxed corners here. So you want to keep everything above that area and be sure that you're stitching it into place along that bottom edge if you're adding like a divider pocket or anything like that. Okay, next up, take a sip of coffee. Let's all take in this beautiful set that I got. It's very much so Alice in Wonderland, and I love it. If you guys don't know, My leg is tattooed and it's all Alice in Wonderland, which I think is kind of funny because I'm not like quote unquote a Disney adult. I just really like Alice in Wonderland. I like the whole story behind it, and I think it's super fun and funky, and there's so many cool illustrations from the original. So yeah, my leg is all Alice in Wonderland, and when I saw this teacup and saucer, I could not pass it up, even though it's absolutely ridiculous and I have no need for it. Cups are kind of my thing. Homemade pottery cups are my thing, so it kind of fit. And now I'm a pretty princess and I get to drink my coffee. And side note, I just got pistachio creamer and it is so good. It's a little heavy on the creamer. I don't normally like it that light, but either way. Take a sip of coffee, water, clean up your space a little bit, and let's keep it moving. As you can see, I put both of my linings together. I've clipped them into place, and now we need to cut out our box bottoms. So using a ruler, I'm going to measure 1.25 inches on both bottom edges. Now you will notice that this is smaller than the exterior box bottom, and that is intentional. That is to reduce bulk and make sure that the interior of the bag nests nicely whenever the two are put together. I don't like a saggy bottom. Cut those out. So another opportunity for customization here. If you want to add an additional structured bottom on the inside, you can do that now. We would do it just like we did the exterior. You're only stitching along the bottom, and then you add your stabilizer and accent piece. I am not going to be doing that since this is already interfaced, and I already interfaced the cork, and I already added the stable bottom. We're just going to run the interior like a normal bag. So that being said, we're going to go to the machine and stitch down, gather our bottom here, stitch across. I'm going to leave a big birth hole here. I'm going to stitch probably 3/4 of an inch or so in, leave this giant birth hole, come over here, gather the bottom, and then stitch all the way up. Be sure to backstitch well at all of your starting and stopping points. Okay, once we get here, we need to reach in and box out our corners. So I'm just doing a peace sign down here in the bottom, and then I'm just going to lay my two seams in opposite directions and then stitch this closed. Now I do like to match the direction of this bottom seam. I'll match that way. Just so that way when I am in here and I'm stitching the base closed, I don't have to fight with the direction that it wants to fold. Just got over here to trim, and look what I found. It never fails. I always forget to put my zipper or my sunglasses case in place. So I'm just going to pick some of these seams and slide it in and add it after the fact. Now we're just going to trim down the same way that we trimmed down the exterior, leaving about 1 inch or so at the top. I'm not going to mess with my sunglasses case too much, but I am going to trim down the rest. All right, next up, we need to put these two together, but we need them to be flipped in opposite directions. So this needs to be inside out and this needs to be right side out. So 1, 2, 3. All right, we're all switched and ready to go. So what we're going to do is on the exterior, tuck your straps down into the bag, and then your interior will nest inside. Keep in mind of your pocket placement. I know that this is the front of my bag because it has the tag and the hidden or the slip pocket. So I want the pocket on the interior of my bag to go on this side. So that way I don't have two pockets that are all full of stuff and bulky whenever the bag is being used. Just slide one into the other. I always start by matching up my side seams, and then I'm gonna stitch or clip first, do a dry fit, make sure everything fits nicely, but clip all the way around the top. All right, once you get it all nice and settled, you need to go to the machine and we will top stitch around the entire top perimeter. You can do a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch here, totally up to you. So when I was sewing this, it was doing a Paul Simon and slip sliding away, and you can see how funky my stitching got. You can see my lining popped up above where I wanted it to be. It got really crazy. So I am going to go back and make this a better top stitch, or make this a better seam, because what will happen is if I run with this, which you can, but if you do, then your whole top edge of the bag is going to be wavy, and that's not what we want. We want a nice, as uniform as possible, straight top edge. So go back around. If you see this happening, go back around and fix up your stitches now. That's really what'll elevate the look whenever we're all done. Much better. So now I have a nice straight seam. It looks a little funky, but once I get it turned right side out, you will not know. That one was so bad, wild. Okay, so I'm not gonna trim this down because it'll just give me a nice ledge to top stitch on. But what I am going to do is reach in through the lining and flip everything right side out. Now that I have it flipped right side out, I have everything tucked where it's supposed to be. What I like to do is moisten my fingertips, and you can just kind of roll the top edge between your fingers, and it kind of pushes the seam up toward the rim. And go around and clip that into place. But I like to do these what I call dry fits, just to make sure that everything on the inside looks nice and that it's not baggy down in there. So once you get a good idea of how everything is fitting, I'm happy with this outcome. But if it were baggy, like say the side seams here were pushing in, it's a little hard to tell because of the sunglasses case, but if these seams were baggy and I had a plethora of fabric bunching down on the bottom there, I would pull it back through and tighten up my side seams on my lining only. But because this all looks good and I already have the top edge clipped, I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch. All right, so I removed my extension table and I added a thick book under my machine to elevate it, and it acts as like a cylinder arm that way. Gives me a little bit more leeway when I'm doing this next round of top stitching. Make sure that you have a fresh bobbin or a full bobbin. You don't want to have to restart on this section. And so I'm going to just, on a side seam, start my top stitch. And now this can be a matter of personal preference. If you like a thick top stitch or like a wide top stitch, go for it. If you like a more narrow one, it's up to you. Just make sure that you maintain it the entire way around. This is how we're looking now. Got our top stitch all complete. Everything's looking great down in there. So now we need to go in through the lining pocket. I like to pull it out first. And then from here, we're going to grab the linings, the interior of the bag, and pull up and through. All right, so here's one corner of my bag and the other. So once you get this pulled out, you're just going to do what you can to get everything nice and lined up. And this is, we're in the pierogi situation here where everything looks super funky. It's got like a dumpling shape, but you just want your interiors to match up nicely, and they should. This should not be an issue here for you. So you get everything nice and clipped. So now I'm going to go to the machine and carefully I'm going to start right here where I ended my stitch line, and I'm going to stitch across. Now, if you notice that your bag was a little baggy, you can make this seam allowance a little bit wider. You can kind of bow it up toward the center. But if everything fit nice, then just maintain that same stitch line that you have over here. All right, now I'm just going to trim this down. And then we're going to tuck the lining back into the pocket. And then while we've got our pocket out, we're going to close this up as well. So using your finger, I like to put my thumb into the corner, grab it on the inside, and then flip it right side out. And then we are just going to fold over and stitch this pocket closed. Now, isn't she just the prettiest gal you ever did see? How fun. So if you want to, you can add a crossbody strap. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video, but if you want to refer to the wide Taisteal video, you certainly can. But what I would do is add some big D-rings right here and then make a crossbody strap. I generally don't add a crossbody strap to this style because it is so tall. I find that it just might be weird, but I don't know. Some people might like it. I think before I sell it on my table, I might just add them and then offer it to somebody because, you know, everybody's different strokes for different folks. So somebody, you know, I might not want it, but somebody else might. Anyways, all that to say, you can add some D-rings here on the top side if you want to add a crossbody strap. And then I want to add a couple of double cap magnet rivet snaps. That is such a mouthful to say for that hardware. But I'm going to do it right under here, just like I did on my wide Taisteal. Now, normally I just leave these guys wide open because I designed it to be a work bag and I thought, you know, easy access to files and laptops and things like that. But I do find that a lot of people like closures, at least some sort of closure. So I'm going to add 2 magnet snaps here. And I was debating just doing one here, but then it's kind of like open on the sides. So I just figured it keeps it more closed if there's 2 over here. These feel a little spread out, but anyways, you can put it wherever you want, or you could just leave it off, up to you. I'm going to add 2 to the top of my bag now. Now what I'm doing is I'm ensuring that my straps are aligned on both sides of the bag. I'm making sure that the top of my bag is nice and even, and I'm clipping it into place, but I'm giving myself room to use my hole punch to snap through both sides. Now that I've got it clipped and held into place, I'm going to just take a ruler and aligning it with this 1-inch wide strap here. I'm going to go down 1/2 an inch, no, 5/8 of an inch, nope, 1/2 an inch, and make my mark right there, and then do the same over here, and then punch and install my snap sets. There we go. So at this point, I would consider this bag done. And I think that she is just a super sweetie. What do you think? All right, folks, we've arrived at the end of yet another episode of the SewGnar Throwback Series. I hope that you enjoyed this one. If you are following along and making these patterns, please, please, please join the Facebook group or my Patreon so that I can see your makes. I love seeing when people make my patterns. It just makes my heart smile. So if you're so inclined and you haven't already, the Facebook group link will be down below, the Patreon, my Instagram, all of that fun stuff. You know where to find me. And as always, if you can, give me a thumbs up, share, comment. It helps in this algorithm to help keep my work coming out to you guys. So anyways, I appreciate the support and I will see you guys next week.